Welcome friends, in this video we're going to learn about local variables. Okay, so local variables, and we'll also take a look at some additional stuff that you can do with them. So for example, generating random values, and we'll also take a look at begin/end and while. All of these things fit together, you'll see very naturally. Okay, so let's begin here. I'm going to make a table this time in my dbase. I would say use my dbase. I've decreased the size of the font a little just to fit everything nicely on the screen. So use my dbase go, and let's make a table. And I'm going to make that table so you can fill it with some values using a while loop. And the values will be random. You might ask, does this have any use in real life? And well, in my particular case, it's good for simulating values sometimes in statistical analysis. I used it for that purpose some years ago. So let's take a look here. I'm going to say create table and then random values. So create table, name of table, random values. Put that down. And between the parentheses, let's create our fields. So our table will be very simple. We'll have an ID field, and then we'll simply have another field called random, where we will place a random value. So I'll say ID, int, integer, not null, so value must be added. Make it the primary key, and then further identity. Now remember, the identity means that it's going to begin at 1 in terms of the ID, and then every time you add a record, the ID will grow by 1. So remember, identity means seed and increment. The seed might be like the first value, and the increment could be the second value. Not null values must be entered. Primary key will be used to identify each record. And as before, ID is the name of it. int is the data type of it. All right, next stage, I'm going to say random and then float. So the name of the field is random, and it's going to slow, and it will store a float data type value. And I'm using the float here just to show you that you can. We haven't used it before. And the random function also gives back a float from its operation. All right, so let's make the table first. Give this a go over here, make sure it takes. Command completed successfully. Again, we don't have to look at it in the table explorer on the left side. We have all the information that we need here. And now we're going to create a loop to fill the table with some randomly generated values. So you begin by typing something like this, declare. And then you write the name of a variable. And it looks very similar to a parameter. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to say at. And the common name that you can give it is counter. Some people also have seen call it loop counter like that. So it counts the number of loops that have executed. And then you specify its data type, say int for integer. At the next stage, again, quite common, you set its initial value. So I'm going to say set at loop counter, say equal to 1. Now, you might ask, why am I setting the value equal to 1? It doesn't really matter too much for our purposes. So it could be said, you could begin from 10, you could begin from 100, and so on, you see? But it's customary to begin at 1. Imagine you want to repeat a process 25 times. You very likely want to begin counting at 1 and then count down to 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and so on, you see? So begin counting at 1 as an example. Not that you have to, but it's customary. Imagine you want to generate 2,500 records. You begin the loop counter at 1, and you stop it, for example, at 2,500. All right, so just simply remember that value that you see there reflects your specific needs, so to speak, what you want to create. In our case, 1 is fine. Then you can type while, so this is our while loop. And with a while loop, you type a condition, so I'm going to say something like that, and then counter less than, say, or equal to 250. So let me add a comment here. This business right there, counter less than equal to 50, is a logical condition that controls how many times the loop operates, that's all. Why did I set it to less than or equal to 50? No reason whatsoever, because I felt like it. I want to make 250 random values to put in the table, that's it. You could put 300, 400, 2,500, try a million, see how that goes, and so on. And remember, this is a logical condition because it's either true or it's false as the loop operates. If the counter value is 20, then that logical condition you see highlighted is true because 20 is less than or equal to 250. If the counter is 298, for example, then obviously that condition would be false. Okay, I hope you've got that. All right, next stage here. I'm going to type begin, and I'll show you why we need to begin eventually, and then end. And between the begin and the end, you put the code that you want to execute, the code that is to be controlled by the while loop. So in our case, we just want to insert random values into our table. So I'm going to type this. I will type insert into random values, and then values. We've seen insert into before. Name of table, and then values, and then within parentheses, specify the values you want to stick in. So I'm going to show you how to use a function called rand. Hover your mouse over it, look at the tooltip. It says built-in function rand returns a float. So it's used to generate random values. So you can stick a function into the values there. The function will run first, generate a random value, and then the insert will stick that value into the table. And then on the next operation of the loop, that will happen again. And when the loop runs again, that will happen again. And in this case, because as you can see the counter is less than equal to 250, we will generate, in other words, in simple English, 250 random values saved in the table, okay? So generate 250 random values and store them in the table. All right, let's continue here. Notice that it says at counter must declare the counter variable at counter, so I'm going to just change that so it says loop counter. That error message is easy to understand, and it's fixed, you see? So now imagine we simply try to run this. We'll leave it in this form. We've learned a little bit. We try to give this a go. We already have the table created. That's good. Then I just highlight all of this that I've created and hit execute. And notice on the bottom it says executing query, and nothing much is happening. There's some kind of problem, you see that? It shouldn't take so long to make 250 values. So we need to add more code. Right now, as you see, this loop is essentially infinite. It will just run forever. Close this. And why is it an infinite loop, so to speak? Take a look. Highlight this code for a second. And now this time go over to debug and step into. You can do F11 also. So debug, step into. Give this a second. And look at what happens over here. Look at that button right there that says step into F11, where my mouse is moving a little bit. I hope you see that. I'm going to press that repeatedly and look very carefully at the yellow highlighting on the screen. See that? It's just running back and forth, so that confirms, first of all, it really is a loop. But there's a fundamental problem, which is this one. Take a look. I've run the loop several times, right? You see me running the loop. And hover your mouse over loop counter, and it says, even though it's very small, stare at it carefully, and you will say loop counter, and next to it is a little 1. In other words, though we have run the loop several times, the loop counter value is still 1. That's not good. We need to fix that. That's why we're getting an infinite loop. The loop counter is not getting increased. We need to fix that as follows. I'm going to shut this down. So we hit this little button over here that says cancel executing query, Alt plus break. And the way to fix that, to get out of an infinite loop, as one way is to type this. Set, and then add counter equal to add counter plus 1. Why is that line needed? And again, name it loop counter so it's consistent. Why is that line needed? What does that accomplish for us? Well, we've seen that without it, we get an infinite loop. So this line as comment number 7, so needed to grow variable or to grow loop counter value. So when a loop operates, this loop counter, remember, is a variable. Its values change. That's a fundamental understanding. So take a look here. Run the code again. Hit execute. And notice fast. It went by, right? And filled the table. Take a look. How do I know? Take a look through the output. See messages. One row affected. You can check. Let's take a look. I'm going to type on the bottom here. Select star from random values. We want to see what's inside. And there you go. So you've got your records. Obviously, I've done this a number of times at this point. You see that? You know why this is so high? Because we were running the infinite loop. And you see the ID has gotten huge, you see? So let's clear that as follows. We can, for our purposes, we can just even up here, let's just drop the table. I'll say drop table random values. I'm trying to show you things incrementally in small pieces. So just drop the table. This will force us to recreate it from scratch. So now run create table. And after that, run this entire block. Execute. And now take a look inside the table with the select star. And let's take a look at the output. Down below, we should have approximately 25 values. Or I'm sorry, 250 values. That's how many I set. And we have 250 values filled with random ones. So remember, 250. If you want to generate 1,000, you change that to 1,000. And again, you might ask, why are we going by ones? You could, for example, go by twos as an example. Keep that in mind. And now the last bit is this one. I'm going to take the begin, I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to take the end, and I'm going to remove it. Imagine we try to run the code in this form without the beginning and the end. So I highlight it, and look very carefully. Debug and step into for a second. And look very carefully at the execution, meaning the yellow highlighted bit, as I step through the loop. This is called stepping through a loop. Take a look. See that? Look at where it goes. It goes the while, insert into, while, insert into. Look very carefully at the movement of the yellow highlighting. It never reaches the portion, see that? Where you're increasing the loop counter by 1. Effectively, that means the loop counter always has the value 1. As a result, the condition that controls everything, this logical condition, is always true, and we have another infinite loop. Let me close this. So I hope you see more clearly now as an example why begin and end are needed. So let's run it with this one more time to differentiate clearly. Hit execute. That's good. So now I have to go debug, step into as an example, and look very carefully at the yellow highlighting step by step. It goes through the body. See that? All the pieces that need to be executed are executed. The insert, the set, and the loop check. Insert, set, loop check. All right, let me close this. All right, friends, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.